people in the room have been sort of exposed to restorative justice principles, and some haven't. So for those of you that have, it's going to be a review, and for those of you who haven't, I think it's important I just talk a little bit about process before we actually start the circle. The whole concept of restorative justice it's an approach of dealing with harm. It's often with violence or crime or harm. And when we look at our criminal justice system, what we look at is we decide, the police initially and others decide whether an individual has violated state law. Have they violated certain elements of the crime? And if the police believe they have, then the police can arrest them, and then bring them into the criminal justice system, and then the prosecutor decides whether they can prove it. And then we go through the processes, and there's all the due process in the court system, but it's all about, can we prove that this defendant did these things? 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever the statute says. And at the end of that proceeding, if the defendant either pleads guilty or is found guilty, then the judge decides what to do with the defendant. And should he or she sentence them to prison or some supervision or a fine, and so it's all about the defendant and the law. And so often there is not any time spent on looking at the harm that was caused by whatever happened.
The way that we found our way into restorative justice, to me it's a really natural fit in the field of domestic violence, because what we hear from people who go through the traditional criminal justice system, what we hear from a lot of victims is once a domestic violence crime occurs, as does any crime, it's a crime against the state. And that's particularly both powerful and hard in domestic violence, because it's a crime against the state. It takes away the voice of the victim. And that's done because victims can be intimidated, they can be pressured to drop the case. So there's real reasons why that happens. And it's been a very powerful processing change, criminal justice change. But it also means that somebody who wants to speak and take some control of their situation is completely voiceless.
It gives the victim a voice, finally. When I use the term in the schools, I tend to say restorative practices, because we're trying to get away from the criminal model anyway in schools.
The key components of restorative justice philosophy are that people want to be in connection with one another. The flip side of that is that when there's a harm or when there's a wrongdoing or a crime, that we have harmed or we've hurt relationships.
Now, restorative justice is often described as a triangle, and the 3 points of the triangle are the victim, the community, and the offender. And although the person who has caused the harm has made a choice to commit the crime, they are linked with these other entities.
The victim's put at the top because the first place we go and look is at the victim or the survivor of the crime. In the center of that triangle is the harm that's been caused by a criminal act or by an act that was harmful.
And there are things we do in our culture that cause harm that aren't criminal at all. We hurt each other. We say things to each other. And whether it's discrimination, whether it's hate speech, whether there's lots of things that we all do and our community does that are not technically criminal that causes a lot of harm. So the idea is really to put the harm in the middle of a circle. The circle, the way we're sitting, is the way that Native Americans often sit, the tribes sit. It's community coming together. And what's important is that there's nobody that's sort of the head, there's nobody sitting on a bench or at a podium, but that we're interconnected and interspersed because we're all equals. We're all part of this community, we're all part of the human community. And what the natives believe, and I also believe, that when somebody in our midst causes harm, there's a ripple effect of harm all over.
So I always tell people that if somebody down the block from you gets burglarized tonight and you never met them, you don't know them, you're not interconnected with them, you hear about that burglary, it impacts you. It impacts the way you live, how you conduct yourself, you lock your doors, you pull your shades, you don't answer the door at night. And that ripples of the community goes much larger to the point of a crime involving a child in California being abducted can affect children in Vermont and the way they live. And so that can ripple through an entire country and sometimes internationally.
And let's take a victim of extreme violence. Many people in this room, I suspect, know or maybe themselves have been a victim of violence or someone close to them. And if, for example, if a relative of yours has been sexually assaulted, a sister or a mother, it deeply impacts the whole family. It impacts people that person knows. And it ripples through all sorts of people that are affected by what happened.
Around the offender, there are also ripples, but the offender is treated differently in restorative justice. The offender is the one who made the affirmative decision to commit either a harmful act or a crime, but the people around that offender also suffer and are impacted: family, relatives, friends, co-workers.
So restorative justice for us was just this, when I started reading about it and started learning more about the process, like, this is an obvious fit for what we do. It's really about having to understand the harm that you have caused to another person and having to really feel that harm and know what that was like.
We look at the harm, and really the ultimate question, and the first question one always ask is, who was harmed? What is the nature of that harm? And after you analyze that, you devise a process to try to address the harm. Victims and survivors that want to participate can participate. You try to get community involved where it's appropriate, and the offender, assuming the offender admits responsibility. And those processes can involve everything from a one-on-one victim-offender dialogue to bringing in family members and family conferencing, to have a larger community presence and community conferencing, or to do a restorative justice circle based on Native American traditions.
The idea of the Native American Circle is that, first of all, we look at, and the natives look at, what's the harm? What is truly the harm of what's happened? And then to talk about, well, how do we go about helping repair that harm? How does it work? Well, the process we're going to use tonight is the circle process. The natives use a talking piece or a talking stick, and I use this particular stone. And what happens, and what I will do in a while, is the facilitator or the keeper of the circle or whoever starts it asks a question of the group. It's an open-ended question, and we pass the talking piece from person to person. And the natives talk about honoring the peace, that everybody's respectful. And the thing about doing these circles, it's not a chance for people to be critical of each other or to think badly. It's an opportunity to speak from your heart as to how you've been impacted or what you're thinking. And we share in our sharing of our stories and our views, and that's really where the richness of the experience comes.
It's sacred space. I mean, I don't know how else to describe it. You treat this reverently, and whether, it doesn't have to be any faith tradition or no religion at all, but it is sacred space, and it is a place where people are going to have a very, very deep conversation. It's one space and place where we can authentically be heard. And there are so few places on the planet in a given day that we can really be authentically heard.
No one is forced to speak. But I can tell you that when people speak, I can tell you that even though you may not believe this, when you tell your own personal story or your own view on things, you are impacting someone in the circle. Each of us gets impacted by different people. And it's that sense of community that we're all interconnected.
I think that the circle process shows us all to be people. That when you sit down together and you sit in a circle and you're facing each other and there's nothing in front of you, that you're bearing some part of your soul. You're saying, here I am, I'm here as a human being. Whether you know that when you sit down and do it or not, that's the experience that happened. And it creates a sense of community.
Anytime we do a circle, a restorative justice circle, I always try to bring in a variety of kinds of people, and we've got a variety of kinds of people tonight. But we will find that we have more in common than we have different, and that's part of the benefit of the circle.
This is a process that I really enjoy because it brings people together from different walks of life. The group was really varied, and as soon as I walked in the door, I was welcomed by people from different parts of the community. Some people I knew, some people I didn't, and it felt like old home week.
And we all come together to take a look at violence, particularly. That's what we're going to look at. And hopefully share our perspectives and our experiences or things from our heart. And from that we'll be richer for it.
Circle processes are great because it really becomes a tool, a way to have difficult or unique conversations around issues that our people may not easily get into. The circle process that's run well with the proper introductory work, proper preparatory work will have people feeling comfortable even in their discomfort when they're talking about an uncomfortable topic. and whether it's a crime or whether it's racism.
Tonight is really our first night to get comfortable with the process. On Saturday, we will have the benefit of some individuals who've been survivors or lived through domestic violence tell their personal stories. But they don't come in anger with victims. They don't come to lecture or be angry. They come to share their stories. And one of the victims will say, the reason they share their stories is before you can affect people in their heads, you've got to affect them in their hearts. And by telling your own personal pain and stories, you move people.
It's the missing link, I think, for what we do, because it really is something that helps us reach the whole person. It's like a spiritual conversion for people, because we do a lot of work with people's ideas and thoughts and what's going on inside their head, but we're missing this piece that really affects people inside their heart.
And the best teacher of people's perspectives is their stories. It's for them to tell the experiences they've had or people they've been close to and how it's impacted people. Because no one responds real well to a lecture on a point with which you disagree, but you can't argue with someone's experience.
And people walk through the world feeling, I think, very isolated in their pain, like, why is this happening to me? What have I done? How to deserve this? What have I done? I must somehow be failing. And this takes that away from people. I am part of this community, and in sharing my stories with other people, I connect with them in very real ways.
I always use the candle because the candle is really a sign of hope. And that's really ultimately what this is about. I mean, but before you get there, you got to recognize and put into light the pain and what's happened. And then the next step is, you can't change the past. What do we do in the future? How do we generate hope and touch people's hearts and do good? And how is it that we as a community come together, all of us, and realize this is our community and that we want to stop the violence?
When natives do circles, they are it's part of their tradition and they understand it. When we try to use restorative justice circles in various settings, we have to sort of recreate a lot of the tradition and understanding among the people that are going to participate, because it doesn't come culturally natural.
It's an experience for handling problems in a community that comes from a real ancestral and real historical and real indigenous place. It also puts a profound responsibility, I think, on the facilitators to show respect for that.
Tonight really is a chance for us to sort of ease into the circle experience a little bit and for people to share, rather than run around and do introductions. When you get the talking piece, if you want to tell us your first name, that's good. If you want to tell us something about yourself, that's fine. If you don't, that's fine too. No one has to identify themselves as one particular group or another here, because we're all part of the same community. And what I thought we would start with tonight is simply ask a question, and I'll give you some time to think about this in a minute, is how the violence in the city of Milwaukee has touched you.
When asking about how violence impacted you, almost everybody in the circle is going to have a story. And so it's an equalizer, and the people that are there who have committed domestic violence don't feel, okay, this is everybody concentrating on me. And the hot lights are on me, and everybody's going to look at my answers. But instead, they can respond about violence that's been inflicted on them or things they've seen, just like the people in the neighborhood can, just like other police officers can. And it again reinforces this, we're all in this together, we're all one family. What one of us does in the group affects the rest of us. And you want to create that tone and that trust level to then enter into the deeper conversation of the topic you're going into.
I'm from down south, moved here when I was like 11 or 12. I'm from the country, so everything down there was kind of slow and easy going. So when I moved here, there was a lot. I moved here on the east side, over here on Richards and Haddon. There was a lot of violence around me, and I found myself trying to run from those type of things. But as a young man, I found myself picking up a lot of adapting to a lot of the violence and picking up a lot of bad things. Somehow, just being around it so much, it kind of wore off on me, and I found myself running. And in a sense, I became kind of like a violent person too, you know.
First of all, for people who have offended or created harm, to suddenly feel like they're enveloped in a community that wants them as part of the community is a whole different experience than one they've ever experienced. you know, whether they be leaders in the community, whether they be women who've been beaten themselves, whoever it is. And then really feeling attached in a lot of ways to people in that circle, and then hearing the woundedness of some of the people through their personal storytelling really touches people in the heart in a whole way different way than watching films or listening to classes about empathy or anger management. This is a human being who cares about you that's come and told you about this experience.
First of all, I want to welcome our new guest this morning, and I've had an opportunity a little bit to explain the circle and the talking piece that I talked to you about.
The second day really is the opportunity for the victims or the survivors in the environment we're talking about to tell their stories. And each one has that opportunity, and it's not unusual for a victim to take 45 minutes, an hour and a half to take you through life before violence, if they can remember life before violence, what happened, what their attempts were, why they didn't leave, why they called the police, what happened, and then how they're feeling now, and for them to describe the impact on their children. All those things lay seeds out there in the middle of the circle that will give root to people understanding what domestic violence is truly about.
What I'd like to do in a moment is just have a moment of quiet to sort of place ourselves in the presence. But before I do that, what we're going to be doing, as I told you the other day, is it's an opportunity to hear from these two women to talk a little bit about their personal experiences. And why don't we just quiet ourselves for a moment and open up your hearts and your ears to be able to listen to their stories, not only with your ears but with your heart.
The other part of sort of having an impactful circle are having survivors that are willing to share the deepest part of that experience. And I always tell victims, you don't have to say anything you don't want to say, but on the other hand, to simply say, he beat me up, and I went to the hospital and it was awful, isn't the storytelling. It is what my life is like, what I felt like, I looked into my children's eyes and that's what I saw. I kept going back because I loved him.
I grew up in a abusive home, alcoholic father, abusive anytime he felt like every time we struggled. And then, I moved up here and everything. I met my abuser when I was 22, he was 32. He used to always accuse me of cheating on him. Never once, 6 years, I never cheated on him. I know he was cheating on me because he would just stay gone on weekends at a time. And I had suspicions that he was doing drugs and everything else like that. There's a lot of incidents that he ended up hitting me up. It happened for 6 years. Grew up thinking it's okay for a guy to hit a woman. It's okay for a guy to end up asking, where are you going, what time are you going to be home, and the guy just doing whatever he wants to do. Well, my kids, they don't like me having no type of relationship. Every guy that comes, I don't bring my kids around no guy, no nothing. But my kids still, they still get scared. Any guy who's raising their voice, we just, me, I'm actually afraid to get into a relationship. I've been single for 2 years and I'm actually scared to death.
To tell those stories is what is impactful. So you want to have victims who are comfortable doing that want to do that, and they want to do it because they will see on the third day that it has such an incredible impact that transforms a lot of these batters and how they see the world and how they see their acts.
In the presence of that kind of sharing, there's a tremendous healing opportunity. And everybody had an opportunity to process things and deal with what came up for them as a result of that sharing. Because it was human being to human being, and various people were sharing how they were touched and impacted by it. It wasn't removed. So there was actually in the sharing, there was a level of healing that I hadn't anticipated.
Each person can talk about the impact that story has had on them, and you never know where people are going to go, but it is very powerful.
And just to hear these women speak and to be where they're at now, I'm just proud of them. I just want to just say thank you for sharing those things, because I too, I'm past that stage again. And I was telling Doctor, how before I went to prison and everything, I used to point fingers at everybody else. And I never really actually dealt with what my wrongs was, you know, so I never got better. So I too used to blame somebody about why you made me do a certain situation, why you made me do it. It was always me. And my thing was for blaming because I wanted to try to boost myself up. You know, my thing was just to make myself believe that what I was doing was right, you know what I mean? So I understand what you guys are saying, you know, and I'm speaking on behalf as a man who has abused somebody, you know what I mean? And, you know, I'm sorry you guys had to go through that. I really am, because I hate the fact that my kid's mom had to go through that. Because she too was trying to hold a family together, school, backbone, you know what I mean, trying to push me in the right direction. But me being a man at the time, I guess, so prideful, didn't want, you know, want stuff my way. And it just got to the point where I had lost control of myself, depressed, lost focus. I just gave up. And that came to my criticism. And that's where I'm at now with all this, just trying to better myself and trying to stay focused and trying to be respectful of women in general. I have 8 sisters. I'm the baby of 12. So I know better, you know what I mean, but we as men sometimes, we get locked in on this control thing, you know what I mean, and that's, you know, like I said, I'm just happy you guys came. It just helps me to continue to stay on the right path.
That is an amazing moment where somebody not only sees it through the eyes of the victims, but identifies as the offender, their offender, and takes full responsibility among peers that he's been with for a period of time and people from the community. That is the beginning of the transformation, that second day, really deep transformation that will go over into the third day.
Through each person sharing of their pain, there was actually a healing that took place. Like the energy in the room became more whole and more intimate and more warm, and I don't think I expected that. I know I didn't expect that through the sharing of our stories that there would be this sense of healing and warmth and level of intimacy that would be created.
We end the circle today with the stories and the reactions to the stories. The third piece of restorative justice is the repairing of the harm, the missioning out and what we go and do. So that's what we will do on Tuesday. We will reflect on, okay, so what do we do? How do we do it? And we talked a little bit about that today, but we'll talk more about that, whether it's our own personal language, whether it's behavior, it's whether sharing stories, whether it's creating other circles, whether what else is going on in the community. So the third day is really meant to be really the light, the hope, the goodness that comes out of it.
So what we're doing tonight is taking some time to think about this experience, to reflect on the time that we shared together. Everybody who's here now has been here with us. Most of us have been here with us together for 3 days. We started on our first night and thinking about what was going on in Milwaukee and the experiences that we've had in our own life about violence and how that impacted us. We're able to hear from some very brave and strong women about the experiences in their own life, and for many of us it's something new to hear their stories. And so today what we want to start with is really taking some time to think to share with each other about how the experience of coming together in this group and talking with people and sharing across all of this room, how that has affected you, what you've thought about that, what you thought about the stories, what you shared with other people in the last couple of days as you've gone through this process, and what you think about it. And so if you want to take a minute, this is a time to really be able to just talk about that experience of being here together, and certainly of hearing the stories of Rebecca. Okay, take a minute.
It was nice being in this group with different diverse people. I don't know what any of you do or where you come from or whatever, but we had a common feeling on how we felt about violence, everything, period, no matter where we came from.
One thing that I have to say is I never thought about the guys. I never thought about, to me, always what was important about domestic violence was the women. I never even gave it a second thought, why? Why do they do this? And now I know that there is a lot of reasons for that.
The apologies were really big for me. I wasn't here on the first night, but being here on that Saturday morning was really impactful for me. And this circle that I just participated in for me was healing on a whole nother level that I didn't even know I needed. I mean, I kind of knew I needed, but I didn't know it was going to come like this.
Able to, tell complete strangers my story and everything. It made me feel whole, like it was okay to move on. But now I feel, I don't know, it just with you guys just telling me, how you feel and the apologies, that hit home. And especially Alfred over there, yeah, he actually, I was just thinking about over and over, just apologizing. And I just actually, I don't know, first time in a long time,
It's a spiritual experience. That's how I describe it. There's something, if you believe in a higher power, you believe in God, you think God is present in people, truly sharing from their hearts, being truly respectful of each other, even with very different views of the world. It's worked for centuries, I think, probably among indigenous people in lots of different ways, and it gets back to that sense of community and caring about each other.
A long, long time ago, before there was deceiving, love was greater than our shame. The stars are getting dim, now we have stopped believing. We've forgotten why we came. We came to find the love that lives where love seems not.